Good evening. I'm Karen Nelson. Welcome to the third event of our spring series, Just Communities. I'm Karen Nelson. I'm Dean of the School of Architecture. And the BAC has been a place of conversation from its inception as a gathering for people interested in design and the city. The word conversation comes from the notion of living with, and further breaks down into an idea of bending or turning back and forth versa between at least two speakers. I mention this etymology because tonight will be a conversation with the audience, a conversation between two thinkers who have co-authored two books. And this book, Nobot, is a kind of conversation that our speakers had with artificial intelligence, both verbally and visually. In 1980, the American conceptual artist James Welling wrote, "These are images that compose our preconceptions and expectations of the possible, and in that sense, we are their product." Tonight, we will hear about this turning back and forth and the production of ourselves in the context of architecture as a discipline, as a practice, and as a field of action. Many of you are familiar with one of our speakers, Dr. Mahesh Daas, who is the president of the BAC. President Daas is also a poet, an author, and a thought leader on the intersection of creativity and artificial intelligence. He's at the forefront of redefining design education, and Daas has authored Leading with Aesthetics, the Transformational Leadership of Charles M. Vest at MIT in 2015, and co-authored with Andrew DeWitt Towards a Robotic Architecture in 2018. With an interdisciplinary lens, President Daas consistently emphasizes the irreplaceable value of human creativity in an age dominated by technology. The speaker who may be less familiar to some of you is Andrew John Witt. Witt is a researcher, designer, author, and associate professor at Temple University. He conducts research focused on novel building systems utilizing advanced materials and technologies. You may be familiar with his Underwood Pavilion at Ball State, made up of tensegrity modules. Witt is an associate editor of the Journal of Construction Robotics and an elected editor for the International Journal of Architectural Computing. Their newest book, Nobot, was fully illustrated by AI and has recently been released. Mahesh and Andrew are sharing some insights about their book this evening. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to them. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm out of practice here.
You're welcome. I can take them. All right. Thank you so much, Karen, for such a thoughtful, inspiring, and generous introduction. Good evening to you all here and online. Thank you for joining us. It's a very special occasion, and it's doubly special because we're joined by my co-author at my home institution here. And this moment has been in the works for a long time. So let's jump in. And we've titled it provocatively, "Is AI the End of Architects?" And it does refer to one of the stories in the book called Architecture Without Architects. Now, are we going to answer the question? Well, you'll have to wait the next few minutes and see. But we will definitely have a conversation about it. So that's what we are hoping to have. So let's dive in. And yeah, so first, I think just a few notes of introduction is there are different types of, shall we say, generative artificial intelligence technologies that are in vogue today. And there are more than these three, but these three are prominent. And the first one is what I think many are familiar with, the GPT, which is generative transformational models that are large language models. And in these large language models, they work with obviously, trillions of tokens of data that they're trained on and so on. And they are also used for audio models. In fact, we are going to be demonstrating one of those too. And the second one is diffusion model. And diffusion model is what many in the creative visual industries are familiar with. So in this case, the way they train these are, you train the image, add noise, add noise, add noise, and then you also train it to detect and make it clear and clear and clear. So you go back and forth. So AI begins to, the neural nets begin to learn how to diffuse and then how to arrive at an information, at an image. So the images we've generated in this book are done through the diffusion model. And the third one is called GAN, is generative adversarial networks. And those are used in generating such things as, well, the bane of our socio-political environment. Deep fakes are produced using GANs. And there are many other kinds of models we won't get into, but these are prominent.
So, yes. Well, thank you for having me here today also. But so as Mahesh was saying, I think some of the interesting things that we begin seeing are sort of like these cheat sheets for architecture, engineering, and everything, which begin to lay out a series of different types of AI models that can be used within a design process. And these are constantly changing like every week, but we can begin to see here, for instance, from conceptual design to detailing, documentation, construction oversight, they begin to touch on all aspects of the design process. And like ChatGPT, which we've all probably interacted with in some way, whether you know it or not. This was sort of an interesting, another sort of cheat sheet that has been around for a while though, but I think the reason that this one is more interesting versus the other one, which lists all of these potential AI models, is this one basically tells you, okay, I want you to act as something. I want you to create something. I want you to do it based off of these sort of specifications. And so you're basically asking this AI to replicate something that, like an architect or an engineer or whatever. You basically fill in the blank with the job and what you want it to do, and then what it is considering. And so just as before we sort of get into things, before the first book Mahesh and I worked on a few years ago was towards a robotic architecture, where we began touching on some of these elements of like machine learning. But this book was a very different sort of beast. It was mostly research and framing robotics within the field of architecture. So from here, we wanted to basically think about how these things are affecting not just the field of architecture, but more like the relationship between AI, robotics, and humanity, and the history of humanity as well.
Yeah, so I think, so is AI the end of architects is a question that we will address throughout this particular talk. And I'm going to begin with talking about one of the important things we need to understand is that artificial intelligence is a technology that has been developed to be aligned with humanness or human purpose or human interaction. And so there is an alignment that these are developed with. And if they're not aligned, they are weeded out. So there is a kind of a theory of, there is a kind of a process of selection of AIs and training them and evolving them, developing them for human alignment. It's almost like domestication of these technologies, right? That is one important thing. The second thing important to note is that this is the first time in human history, it's the first time in human history that human level intelligence is available outside of the human body. Just take a moment to imagine that. It is the very first time in human history that such extraordinary levels of intelligence are available outside of the human body. And some of these cases, these are specialized superhuman capabilities that they have. Then the next thing is that as we begin to work on this book, we debated whether to produce a scholarly book, as we did the last one, towards robotic architecture, which is a very highly technical book and a comprehensive coverage of research taking place in the labs and universities and the industry across the world. And we wanted to do something similar again, but we decided not to do that. Why? Because we thought this is a kind of a discussion and a debate that should be accessible to broader public. And hence we chose modes of fiction and dialogue as the modes of writing and visual presentation. So we chose the graphic novella format for that reason. We started writing this about 4 years ago. And we've been working on it, and all the text has been developed largely over 3 years. And then we hit the snag. And I'll show you, Andrew will talk about why and how. But these are the kinds of imagery that are interesting, that to imagine with AI is different from imagining by ourselves or otherwise. And that is what we try to do here. So what will our role as humans be in working with human and post-human technologies as we herald a new era? And that's a question that we'd like to address. So here I hand to Andrew.
Okay. Could you go to the next slide? I think one of the things that was important to Mahesh and I with this, once we decided that this was no longer going to be the research book that we sort of set out to do, was that we thought it was really important to tell the story of AI and the sort of where it has come from and where it is going through storytelling. And so over a series of, could you go to the, or should I take that? Sure. Okay, thank you.
That's easier.
So over the period of 2 years, Mahesh and I first began writing all of the text, and we wrote many stories, and not all of them have made it into the book, but basically we started with the narrative, and then from that we began iterating. So let's see. And so at the beginning we started in a more traditional way. So we had the text and we began working with Travis, who was really good at sort of storyboarding, and we storyboarded everything in like traditional means, and we tried to get sort of our ideas out visually. But I think the problem that we began to run up against is that our own preconceptions of what we thought the project wanted to be were not what the project wanted to be. And so we had all of this text and nothing to visualize it. And then in the summer about 2 years ago, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, and a lot of these other things began to emerge. And as soon as we saw that, it was kind of like it was the point where we knew how to illustrate the project now. And it wasn't just because we could make 15,000 images. It wasn't that. It was because we were able to sort of give away I think, some of the control that we had in what we thought the book wanted to be. And instead begin working with this tool or this AI to think about how we could reimagine it. And so I think 2 Thanksgivings ago, we came together and we basically we narrowed the book down to a series of chapters, and we began developing each of the sort of graphic styles for each chapter. And over a series of months and tens of thousands of images, we narrowed 4 unique languages visually down that tied to the 4 unique sort of narration styles of the book. And once we sort of had all this together, we worked with another good friend, Nagesh Shinde, as a real human graphic designer, to basically put all of this material together. And we had a fun editing crew. So at my house, put my son to work early. First, we basically did all of the like the layouts and everything in InDesign, got all of the sort of proofs, and nothing ever goes sort of as easy as you think it would. But there's a lot of testing, and then you have to send it to your editors again, who are always freaking out. And so this is the state of my house whenever something else showed up. They thought the seas looked like Pac-Man. And so we sort of knew we were onto something also because the first book was very much academic. And actually this book, my son, who was in first grade at the time, was actually reading it for his in-class daily reading. And so the level that we tried to make it sort of more accessible, as Mahesh said, but not just for accessible for all, I would say more age groups as well, besides just a broader accessibility. And so this is obviously what we wound up with in the end. So I will pass this back to you, the control.
Yeah, thank you. So that's, I think crafting the book has been as a physical artifact, as well as image and storytelling, has been exciting. And our collaboration with Oro Editions, our publisher, was quite extraordinary because they were very open to exploring what kind of book. And this is a truly different kind of book. This does not fit in a particular genre. Certainly it is science fiction, certainly science fact and science fiction and dystopian. Some people might see it as a science fiction horror, and some may see it as a philosophical book, but because it is deeply imbued in notions of existentialism, phenomenology, and so on and so forth. So all of those went into making these 4 stories. And these are 4 very different stories. One is a dialogue. And I'm going to just introduce to you these. So before we launch into this, we'd like to maybe go through a formal introduction of the book and what the book is about in the voice of AI using our narrative. Here we go.
Once upon a time, in this case, is a few billion years. We always wanted to begin our book with once upon a time. So there you are. It has taken 13,800,000,002,023 years for these words to be written. We pretend to be precise, but really who is counting? In truth, these words could not have been written any earlier in the exact order in which they appear here. Did we say we are 2 robots? Does that come as a shock? Granted, we are not the first to realize who we are. That credit goes to a humanist robot named Rodney Brooks, who revealed himself a robot in the year 2008 AD. We still have some doubts about our self-realizations, but then we think skepticism is healthier than certainty. This is not the first time robots have written books, but we argue this is indeed the first time 2 self-realized robots have penned a book. Our previous book, Towards a Robotic Architecture, gave us an elaborate excuse to delve into the mysteries of robots and humans. We want to use our perspective to help liberate nearly 7 billion fellow biological robots inhabiting the planets number 3 and number 4 who are capable of realizing their true nature. We see robots who deny their own identity, as well as robots unaware of their existence. Some even call themselves human. We do not claim this work to be original. This book may have been already written, read, and received glowing reviews in Fahrenheit 451 in a universe or many universes that preceded ours. At least copyright claims do not extend from one universe to the next. We are saved by the Big Bangs. We cannot locate the exact hour and day when the idea for this book struck us. As with many ideas, it is possible the thought was born when we first set our sights on a robot, in a comic book, or a toy chest, or a film. It is likely the thought of writing a book about robots and humans lived dormant in our neural networks like a Manchurian candidate, waiting for the right time to reveal itself. We mentioned earlier this is our second book together. The number has great significance. It is the smallest and the only even prime number, and is the third number in the Fibonacci series. Yet the square root of 2 produces the first irrational number. Recognizing the significance of the number, we have taken on writing in pairs, attempting to reconcile two types of narratives, bridging two fascinating phenomena, robots and humans. We look back into history to speculate about the future by firmly rooting ourselves in the present. We summon into presence a deeper connection with our lived experiences by exercising, as biological robots, our fundamental ability to wonder. Organ Sonata number 3 in D minor, BWV 527, engulfs us as we write these words. The composition is a lyrical duet, a conversation in andante, just fast enough for a wandering walk and just expansive enough to clear a space amidst our crowded thoughts for wonder. Our book aspires to be this kind of conversation between us and you, reader. So please pour yourself some Chateau Lagrange 2011 Saint-Julien as you listen to Bach and read the robot's expeditions into being human. They pair well.
So that's actual preface from the book, by the way, read by AI. That's quite interesting. So this is this is what leads to the first story, which is a dialogue between a robot and Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges. So Borges wrote a short story called The Circular Ruins, and we took that as a story about humans and robots and AI and gods. So humans, gods, AI, and robots in one stretch. So that's how we began to, have this dialogue. And in this particular dialogue, what we talk about is what does it mean to be human? Is there such a thing absolutely defined and unchangeable called being human? Or is it somehow defined by us and does change time to time with respect to what environment we live in? And it's obviously the latter. And the AI and robots, the way these are defined by various people is that robots are made, AI is also made, and those which are made are technologies and they don't have the human status. Then the humans are actually born. And by being born, there is a certain status attained. Gods are said to be never born, always existing. But then when you really look into it, there are variations to all of these themes that blur the boundaries and problematize these definitions. And we basically conclude here saying, it is not easy to say this is human, this is robot, this is AI, and this is God. And that these are all pretty fluid definitions. And that we might end up defining ourselves by these technologies, just as we have defined ourselves by many other technologies we have created in the past, such as clocks, such as computers, such as all kinds of things. So that's the first chapter. And the second chapter.
And so I think whereas the first chapter looks at sort of framing robotics and AI within human history, the second chapter looks more towards a recent or a near future, maybe, where the boundaries between humans and robots begin to blur socially and within sort of within daily lives. And so in this chapter here, which takes place in the mountains of northern Hokkaido, Japan, it looks into some of the social issues within sort of humanity and how those issues might begin to sort of collide with other intelligent beings. And so what happens when we're not necessarily the only ones who take care of ourselves, but we might need to begin to have help, like in terms of rehabilitation or in terms of living through other sort of non-human, either blanking on the word somehow, non-humans. Just put an S on it and it'll be good. And so I think in this chapter, it also begins to look at some of the potential issues that could arise once you are sort of relying on intelligent infrastructures or intelligent buildings, issues of sort of intrusion from those on the outside, or even what the relationship between humans, and AI begins to, like, basically what that relationship changes to. Because right now we see these AI as tools, but what happens when they become more than that? What happens when they become family, or when they become sort of your caretaker, or like that? Those are all of the sort of the social things we begin to come into with this chapter. But also, I think the question, one of the questions for me also in this is what happens when architecture becomes more than just architecture? What happens when architecture itself becomes intelligent and becomes a being that you interact with? And so, yeah, so that's basically the gist of Aiko. Sorry, lost where I was there for a second.
Great. And the next one is called I, Eternal Nobot. So this is situated 7,000 years in the future, when the whole, and it's a long verse. So these poems are written from the perspective of beings. They call themselves Nobots. They call themselves Nobots because they believe they're not robots. They refuse to be called robots, so they are not, and so no bots. And Nobos, they call themselves, and they write and they reflect on the human civilization that once existed on Earth. And yet they ponder and continue the life and traditions and patterns that were once established by humans. So that's the gist of this particular story. And it is a dystopian story, without a doubt. And it is all strung together by, and this takes place in the Indian city of Banaras, also known as Varanasi. It's a thousands of years old city and known for its unusual geography and mythology, traditions, and many things, a very powerful city. And my graduate thesis was on this city, so it's very familiar to me. And so these are a series of about 40 poems strung together as continuous verse wondering about the river that runs through the city that connects, and the river standing for time, the river standing for, of course, itself, the water, the river standing as a being, and so on and so forth, stringing together these experiences over time and over space. So in this, we wonder, and the Nobots wonder about what it is to be a Nobot and how it relates to the humans and human civilization, their status. Once upon a time, they were oppressed in the human society, and they try to rise up. And eventually, when the human civilization ends, they establish themselves as the beings inhabiting the earth and the city. And so that is, and that's a chapter that ends with the word human. Because once again, as I said, the more we wonder about technologies we create, the more it brings us back to the question of what is it to be human? So we actually end the book with the word human. We start with the word we robots, and we end the word with human. So in between, there is a lot that happens about pondering the status definition and what these technologies mean, more than just instrumental terms that we currently talk about. So now we go into the story about the title of today's talk is AI, the End of Architects, in this particular story called Architecture Without Architects. And I'm going to read an excerpt from the book and then invite Andrew to do the same. I stepped forward and knocked on the door. Yeah, we start with fear grips architects. I hope it does, right? But we will have a discussion about this. I stepped forward and knocked on the door. The interwoven patterns of wood and metal sounded an unfamiliar, almost musical noise. No response. I waited another minute and was about to knock again, only to be greeted by two eyes peering through the slot in the door. Who are you? Why are you here? A female voice demanded. Hello, Tatiana. I'm Felipe, I responded calmly. My friend Anna told me where to find you. I'm in search of the last remaining human architect. You must be mistaken, she said quietly but sternly. Her eyes disappeared from the slot. I understood her trepidation. It had been decades since human architects were outlawed and artificial architects became prevalent. At the beginning, the two life forms worked together. But over time, architecture followed the path of many other fields such as management, medicine, and law, where human professionals were outlawed and replaced by AI.
In the mind of an AI and their biologic masters, humans had proved obsolete, inefficient, and risky. Human capabilities were no match for the godlike abilities possessed by AI professionals. Please wait. I have come a long way to see you, I pleaded. I know you have risked a lot and suffered greatly because of what you do, but your assistance is essential to create an equitable future for both human architects and AI architects, I continued. I don't believe you. You are with the government. In your heart, you must know I am not. If that weren't the case, you wouldn't have said what you did. How do I know that you are not here to trap me? She demanded. It had been nearly 30 years since humans had been banned from designing buildings, landscapes, interiors, products, or anything else. Inefficiency, inequity, bias, lack of safety, costs, delay, and human error had all been pointed to reasons to criminalize human design. In reality, this was nothing more than an excuse for control. Although a subtle control, architecture had been reimagined as a tool to shackle humanity. Societies around the world believed that eliminating the human factor was simply the best way forward for human beings.
So, is it the end or a new beginning?
Cyrus thinks the Nobots are the new beginning.
So it sounds like it's a new beginning, according to Cyrus and his son. So he designed a Nobot and inspired by Nobot, must say. So we ended on that note, but open it up to the discussion. Thank you for this opportunity, and let's dive into the discussion. All right, as you're gathering your thoughts, let me preface by saying that we are here as two weather people, okay? So I'm a weatherman bringing you weather forecast. I have no particular preference one way or the other, but I'm reading the weather and I'm saying these things are in the offing and we need to address it. There is a storm perhaps on the way and we need to take certain measures, address it. Perhaps there is a nor'easter coming and we need to make sure the roads are salted and sanded and so on and so forth. So the question is, what do we need to do when we see such an extraordinary phenomenon developing? Certainly it is our own making, right? This is not a natural occurrence. It is a human making. And so where do we go from here? What does it mean to us? Broadly as humans, and more specifically as designers of various kinds.
Or do we need to pass them
Yeah,
on?
so I think we have questions. Let's start with Alejandro and then we go from there. Yeah, let's give you a mic here so
Carl,
everybody
You
can
can
hear.
take mine for now.
So AI is just getting started, but we're already seeing a power struggle that comes with it, right? There's fear that people have when they see the power of AI. It's incredible just how fast it is accelerating. In the context of AI, do you believe there is the right answer for how designers and creatives should position themselves? Should we try to outdo AI, to work with AI, submit to AI?
Yeah, great question. I think Alejandro's question is really, what should we do? How do we deal with and handle? How do we relate ourselves to this new technology? I will begin and maybe Andrew can also address that. So the first question is that we need to understand what we're dealing with. We can't hide under a rock and think nothing is happening, number one. And number two is a famous, one of the famous sayings that I really like goes like this. If you're not at the table, you are on the menu. So whatever it is that you do, we need to be at the table as we are shaping these technologies because they're aligned with what we do, what we want. And therefore, there should be some agency we need to exercise in shaping this. It is not like an inevitability that is coming our way that we need to accept. We definitely don't need to accept. We need to definitely shape. We need to take a critical stance. But first, we need to familiarize ourselves, engage, immerse ourselves in these tools, see what they're capable. And that is why we've written this book. And that is why we chose the AI to illustrate the book and to actually, generate the voice, the audio book version of it as well. So that's the approach that we have taken as creatives. And here we are with the book. And here we are having a conversation about the book. And so that is what I think is very important. First thing is acknowledge that this is a phenomenon. Second thing is understand it as a phenomenon, what it is. And next is to learn about how to wield it, its tremendous power. And then to be able to take a critical stance about What is the value of it? What is the purpose of it? What does it mean to be human? And how does it then serve that particular purpose? And then you can mobilize socio-political systems, because you're right, Alejandro, these are systems of power, without a doubt. And those who hold these will exercise power, right? And so how do you then work with these? And that goes to the notions of power dynamics and in societies and the political dynamics. So it brings us back to familiar grounds on all those fronts. Absolutely. I think there may be a question online we can go to. Yeah, Karen, your choice.
So Justin says, what if this is the next iteration of power drill? Power drills to replace carpenters and simply change the flow.
You want to take it? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So like, yeah, so I guess it's not really a question, right? It's more of a statement that, or I guess it is, but like, what if this is not the end, but it's just something new that basically transforms how we work. And I think, so the reference was to a power drill, right? So without it, like now that we have that, we're able to do things a lot faster, more efficiently. And so I think that, like from the fact that, like, well, was Alejandro, we were talking before, and you're already working with this in class. And for us, for instance, like Mahesh was, or like we talked about before, this was, before we had this tool, we were sort of stuck. Or before we had this, I would say collaborator, right? Because it's not necessarily just it's not a tool anymore. And so it became something that we were able to work with to further who we were, what our skills were as a human. And I think that just like we've seen generation after generation, right? From the 80s with CAD to 3D modeling, to computational modeling, to robotics, everyone always fears that it's sort of the end of the world, but then we have to evaluate it. We begin to see how we can utilize it. We begin shaping it ourselves, and we make it basically rethink what architecture is and how we design as architects. And I think one thing, like the architecture without architects, for those of you who don't know, it's actually sort of, there was a very famous sort of exhibition in the 60s or 70s.
MoMA?
By Rudolfsky, was it? Which basically, it was called Architecture Without Architects, but it was looking at everything that, like, architects is a term, right? That we've sort of created to say that we have some power in what we do. But the majority of human history was created without architects. And so his exhibition basically looked at all of that work from all of these other places in the world that we typically don't think about when we think about architecture. And I think when Mahesh and I were thinking about this as well, it's like, well, that's sort of the past. What is the sort of the other end of the spectrum? And I think that if we don't have our sort of hands in at the table shaping these things, it could become dystopian, right? But if we are sort of there to work with it, to redefine who we are as designers, to collaborate with these new intelligent, what's the word you use? Agencies. Sorry. Yeah. So if we're not there helping to shape them, then we are going to be not at the table.
So Dustin, I think I'll just add to it that we pondered, and I have, as Andrew talked about, my work in design computation, architectural computing, robotics, AI goes back 3 decades. And there is always a question about how do you address the latest technology? Are the tools? Are the systems? Are the agencies? How do you refer to them is a good question. And one of the more popular things people would say is, oh, this technology is another pencil. It is just like a pencil, or it's just like another thing. And so a drill, a tool, it achieves one particular task, if you will, perhaps 2, maybe 3 tasks. It does not have a mind of its own. It is wielded by our hand. and you engage it. In that sense, it is a tool. It has, whereas when we begin to get into computation, particularly artificial intelligence, they don't fit that definition anymore. Yeah, sure, certain aspect of what they do can be termed as tools, but it is intelligence. And as I said, it is human level intelligence now available outside the human body. You can talk to them. You can achieve a variety of things. They know a lot more than any individual one of us does, right? ChatGPT has passed, I don't know, 23, 24 different exams in fields as far apart as, law and architecture or some other, there are just 20, 25 different disciplines in which it passed exams. It passed an MBA exam. It's like, that's superhuman, right? None of us individually as humans can do that. It is, and you can't refer to it as a tool anymore. It is an agency. So I've dropped the word of tool from my repertoire in referring to AI and any powerful technology like that. They are systems and agencies. And they wield far more power over us. Your drill does not have a power over you. A pencil does not have a power over you. Whereas an AI can have power over you. And that's a very different relationship and proposition. So I've changed my vocabulary as I began to learn more about it and to begin to address them closer to the phenomena and less with the past experiences and more with really being open to these new phenomena that are different.
I'll just say my pencil does have power over me because I don't know how to use it.
Andrew basically says his
I
pencil has power
struggle with
over him.
pens and pencils.
All right, let's go to a question here. Yeah, so once they begin to determine reality, once they begin to shape reality, and it's not just this, but image making, video making, reality making through deep fakes and such as well, and imagining realities that humans alone could not imagine before. All of those begin to change. And then those who wield these systems will exercise different kind of power, right? To shape reality, to shape what you think is real and valuable and important. That exceeds anything that human history actually, and that is why, over hundreds of scientists have written a letter to the US Congress saying that you have to begin to regulate AI. And I haven't seen a letter to Congress trying to regulate a pencil. So that's what I mean by it. There's a question back, Beth. And I think there is a question back there as well. Let's go there first. I think you had a question first.
Hi, so my name is Jason, I think all of you earlier. So I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the book, and I also appreciate the prompt that you guys are focusing on. One of the things that I like to ask in my class at the beginning, sometimes it's sometimes it doesn't. There's one question that I put in the context of do you want a Star Trek world or do you want a Star Wars world? And for some of the people who aren't familiar with each one of the shows, Star Trek world is based on this premise of technology moving, advancing almost to the point where they have to worry about mundane things, survival, and they can focus on other things. The Star Wars usually has a effect where a slight view that's kind of collected this group and uses it in some way to control the majority of the other people. And so this is a little bit of a compliment. Guys, it's a particular standard, but the question, the problem I want to present a little bit is what is our social contract that we start to make with each other? And this idea that we as a group, assuming, which I do, inevitably the trajectory is going to stay the same, not slow down, back up faster. what kind of social contract do we make sure that we start to have as architects, one, but two, as humans, to ensure that, you know, we're moving in the Star Trek.
Yeah, Jason, thank you for that question. So Jason's question is about, are we looking at a Star Trek world where it is based on the premise that technology advances, unifies, and connects and advances what is the best in life, or Star Wars world, where the worlds are at war perpetually. And there is uprisings and there is constant struggle and so on and so forth. I think that there is the 2001 Space Odyssey world. And so these are all, I think the question is going to be dystopian. The reason we chose dystopian genre here is once we begin to see those realities, we can avoid them. And we write them so that we can avoid them. We visualize these so we can prevent and take steps to, let us say, navigating around them or away from them, right? That is the reason why we chose this particular tack on it. And that is why the horror movies and, you know, all of those are, that's why we enjoy, or rather we appreciate those literary approaches. That aside, I think here, the question is the development of these technologies, what they're capable of, far ahead of, beyond the social contract and the political systems and the regulatory mechanisms and the systems of law, all of those things? And the answer is, of course, yes. Unfortunately, yes. And the question is, will they keep pace? What is the price we may have to pay for not being able to be in pace with it? And it's, I mean, obviously the technologies move faster. No, say that.
Or the benefit.
Or the benefits. The question is cost and benefit always, right? Because every technology has cost and benefit. Let's say nuclear technologies have costs and benefits and so on and so forth. And the question is, when does the cost outweigh the benefit or vice versa? And the question is out there, open right now. And our intent in writing this book and putting that on the debate table is so we can actually begin to see more beneficial directions and not so much of a cost. All right, let's go to a question, if you don't mind, first to online, and then we'll come back to Kelly.
So, Pat Loki, our originator of landscape architecture school in PhD, asked why just discuss AI and architecture, why not all these matters?
Yeah.
And the climate change makes it obvious that teamwork is needed to address the complex questions at hand.
Yeah, good question, Pat. Good to see you. And thank you for the note you sent me earlier as well. So there is a debate out there. So the reason we use architecture in this is a shorthand, but actually in the book, one of the stories is about the city, right? So there is an urban design and landscape dimensions and all of that. But one of the chapters is architecture without architects. So we thought it's provocative and relevant. But the book actually covers quite a gamut. And it goes beyond design disciplines too. It goes to embrace the larger mission of being human, the larger purpose of being human, the phenomenon of being human, and life on Earth, and so on and so forth. So there is quite a broad scope within the book. But in this particular case, for this talk, we adopted that particular focus. But it is, to your point, addresses a broader scope. Kelly.
One is, I feel there's a tension in using a technology to demonstrate the dystopian possibility of that, right? And to your last point about how it takes the book addresses like the fundamental question of what is it to be human, when the presentation over this is not human. So that tension is really interesting to me, in terms of like reading the text.
Yeah, Kelly Bean, or Vice President for Academic Affairs. So she has asked a question coming from her disciplinary background of English and literature perspective. So the question is what it is to be human. And as I think we noted at the outset, but also throughout this book, there is nothing static as being human. And that there is something we define ourselves. For instance, if you ask the just born baby what it is to be human, what will it say? Nothing much, and then that's all there is. People have to learn and create the notions of being human and what it is, and we can only define it with respect to our environment. And that begins to change time to time. But there are certain themes that are universal, right? So we need to go back to those universal themes and perhaps affirm them and perhaps to see how they are echoed. And that's why in one of these stories, in this case of Benares, the robots begin to continue the human civilization and the traditions and the mythologies of human civilization. So then they actually, in one of the poems, it says, what it is to be human is, I will read this, if I may borrow the book, Karen.
Please.
Yeah. I'll read this. The very last poem in the book is also to address Pat Lohit's question. So it goes this way. To be unhuman, and you can also read it as non-human. To be unhuman is not the antonym of being human as inhuman is. To be unhuman is not the antonym of being human as inhuman is. To be me, in this case it is a Nobot talking, to be me is as much to be human, who created me in the image of being human. So there is some circularity in there, because we are creating these technologies in the image of being human. And they're defined by that. And they're about that. You can't yank something of being human from these technologies. And yet they are different. And they will transform us as we have transformed them.
Yeah. Question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Question online?
It's not quite a question, it's a claim.
Sure.
Diane T. Watson says, AI can become liable for anything, so it will never take over the human.
Diane, I think you're right that right now it's tough to hold it accountable. And that actually is true with self-driving vehicles. Those questions are raised. And that is why I said jurisprudence has a lot to catch up about how to address these phenomena. But I'm pretty sure sooner or later, we begin to change the regulatory environments and jurisprudence as well to address these. But at the moment, you are absolutely right. It is very tough, very difficult to hold these accountable when you don't know the authorship and the responsibility where it lies. I agree with you. Question back here and then back. You first, please.
Like, if they are really like the ideas itself, or kind of like a if it really makes our text with the theories of not really doing anything over time,
What's your name? Fern. Good question. So the question is more about the nature of AI, right? What is it? And how do we begin to imagine it? And I think that's one thing that we talk about in 4 different stories is, first of all, AI is a technology, right? But then we are also natural technology, and technology is part of who we are too. That aside, AI is a technology. What kind of technology is it? It is based on intelligence, right? How do you begin to generate intelligence, and how do you mimic human intelligence, and perhaps even surpass human intelligence, right? And the way they do it is what I have given you earlier as the 3 models, and then there are more models too. They're all based on neural nets that adapt a certain process of learning, and then being emulating and responding. When they respond, they synthesize things that is very different from assembly, very different from just simply pulling from database something. So when it is generating an image, or when it is generating an idea, it is not like it is assembling things in a phenomena, as a phenomenon. It is assembling only in the sense that a large language model puts a word after a word after a word after a word using a certain statistical algorithm. But then we do the same way too. When we say we do the same way too, I use the word we, do the same way too. I learned over my lifetime that those words belong together in order to express something. And the neural nets do the same thing. They have learned it in a certain way, but then they have learned from a whole lot more of knowledge, but then a whole lot less than what I have learned on too at the same time. In what ways? I, as a bodily presence, in a way, embodiment is an important concept there. So AI knows a lot, but it is not embodied knowledge. And that is where there is a distinction, there is a limitation. That artificial intelligence is disembodied knowledge. It does not have a body, and when something does not have a body, it does not have a point of view. It does not have a viewpoint. And that is its limitation, perhaps its strength, but also its limitation. What we, each individuals, have is a viewpoint and unique lived experience. That knowledge is absolutely unique. That cannot entirely be captured by AI per se, until AI is embodied in something. So that is how I would just simply broadly leave it at that and say it is very powerful form of technology, and it is human-like. Yeah, one more question I think we have.
This backdrop, I appreciate your title that like the last 6 years, it's always been a common question that AI is architects, but I think also addressing artistry in the finance community is important. Because I think the foundation of well architects also. Do you think AI is just the end of
End of?
The end of the fine arts.
Fine arts, oh yeah, the arts. Now we are expanding the scope to arts and other creative disciplines too, right? So I think as a last question, we'd like to make sure we are not leaving it unanswered, that question. So you are bringing us back to the question. So I'd like to say that art, architecture, and design, broadly speaking, are about being human, enabling human life, embodying human relationships, and answering and addressing human needs by understanding specific viewpoints and by expressing specific viewpoints. In that sense, it is very difficult for no matter how powerful an AI is to surpass it or to substitute it entirely. Right, so that is one. The second thing is that it can certainly enable us, empower us also in our expression, in our imagination. We can imagine with, think with, and work with, and express with these new phenomena. And that is why we wrote this book that way. That's why we made the book using AI, about AI and robots. And that is that is a form of, that's a work of art in and of itself. So the book making itself, when you hold the book that we made, we designed it and crafted it with great care and great utility. So it has actually metallic copper paint in there, true copper metallic paint, and open spine, and it's very tactile. And we designed it to be held by a human hand. So all of those went into making of this book. For an AI, that would be a rather tall order to be able to make. So I would like to affirm, and I'd like to leave us on the optimistic note, all of you here and online, that although we provocatively titled it as such, if we are at the table shaping these, using these, employing these, and having a say in this, then I think we can shape them to greater relevance. Thank you.